And here we go. All right, everybody, welcome to the call. Welcome to those of you who are live on the call, and welcome to those who are listening to the replay. I'm Jackie Elmer, and this is a call that I did years ago. For years on Thursdays, I ran a weekly call, a training and coaching call, really designed to give you those tips and tools and hacks and really share with you those different things that I have done throughout my career to build a successful business, online, offline, all of that, because business and life definitely mix and mingle. And the most important thing that you can do is be very clear on what your goals are, what your action plan is going to be, your thoughts and beliefs behind it, and then really get that clarity, get that commitment, and take that consistency to do what it takes to move your business forward. So today we're talking about the comparison hangover. Got some great calls planned in the future, including, creating your vision 2020 for the year 2020 that's coming up, how we get paid based on value, radical acceptance and release, and that's when things go bad in our business. So I've got a lot of good stuff planned. But today let's specifically talk about curing the comparison hangover. So you might want to get some paper and a pen or a journal or something to jot down some notes as I walk you through some exercises. What I've learned along the way myself personally is that there's true power in writing down what you learn. Now, I know for me, I took my business online back in 1999, and I've barely written anything since then. I have been, done so much typing that I can barely read my own handwriting, but I'm really working on shifting that back around. About a year and a half ago, actually probably about 20 months ago, in April of 2018, I started really seriously journaling again. Now, I had journaled on and off, but I really made a commitment to two things: to my 10,000 daily steps and to journaling very consistently. And it's made a huge difference in my life, in my mindset, in my business, in my relationships, in everything. So there's true power in writing down versus typing. When you write something down, it really does tend to instill it in your memory, and it just gels within you in definitely a much bigger way. And it's so nice to be able to flip back through. I highlight pages with, markers and different things, red stars, of that information that I want to go back to. And then with my journal and with my business planning, at the end of the year, I always go back through and I look and see what was the year like, what all happened in a year. And it's amazing what you can forget. So I really want to encourage you to write down what you're learning. Okay, so I'm really pumped about today's call. I love this topic because it's a question I hear over and over again, especially in light of social media. And that is, feeling like we don't measure up, that we're not good enough, and that tendency that we have to really compare ourselves to others. Now, today I call it comparanoia. That's the paranoia that everybody else is doing something or living a better life or having more success in their business or have stronger relationships or whatever it is. It's that paranoia that other people are doing better, and we tend to compare ourselves to those people. So comparison takes on a lot of forms. It takes on the feeling of unworthiness. Sometimes we have envy and jealousy. It brings up self-doubt for us. And these are all feelings and emotions that are just part of the human experience. It doesn't make you bad. Please don't shame on yourself or feel terrible for having these emotions. All of us do at different times in our lives. Again, it's just part of the human experience. The key is understanding where the thought comes from, what it is that triggers that thought, the feeling that comes up for us around that, and then the action or lack of action that we take one way or the other based on that. Because ultimately, that's what ends up in our results column. Okay, especially whether you're building a business, whether you're working on weight loss and health and wellness and fitness, whether you're working on a relationship, finding that perfect partner, strengthening your marriage, whatever it is, it's the thought process that we have along the way that leads us to the actions that ultimately determine our results. So that's really an important thing to keep in mind. Now, I mentioned social media has just taken a huge toll on comparanoia, I think, for all of us. In the past, we had an idea of what was going on with people. We certainly had our neighborhood. We had people we worked with. We had family members. And we could see whatever we made up in terms of success or lack of it, or we could make up stories about whatever was going on based on when we would see people get together, that type thing. Today, there's no shortage of people that we can hop online and compare ourselves to, beat ourselves up about, and bring on those feelings of unworthiness, those emotions that come up for us. I know in the last few years, I've become very fascinated with the word anxious and the word anxiety, because I have to say, I'm in my 50s, and that's not a word that I typically associated with. I can't ever remember in my past saying, oh, I feel really anxious or I feel anxiety. I can remember feeling nervous about something. I can remember feeling fearful. I can remember feeling uncertain or doubt. I could always put a different word to it than anxious or anxiety. So when the millennials came along and really started talking about this, my daughter included, it became a very fascinating topic to me, trying to figure out what is creating this. I mean, especially for my daughter, I don't live her life, obviously, but she grew up in a very secure household, really didn't lack for much. Was definitely loved and knew that she was, and had tons of opportunity, of which she realizes and is very grateful. So it became curious to me what it was that was creating this anxiety in her. And ultimately, I have definitely determined that social media has a lot to do with it, because most of us hop on social media often within the first hour of getting up. So we have our first stab at comparing ourselves to our first stab at seeing firsthand how much better everybody else's life is. I always say we compare our B-roll to everybody else's A-roll. We compare the film, if you will, comparing it to that. We compare our B-roll film, the stuff that got cut from the main production. We compare that to what we view as everybody else's A-roll out on social media. And let's face it, that is not reality. Most people don't put all of the dirt and all of the dirty laundry and all of the saga and all the different things that we go through in real life. Most people don't put it out there. And that's okay, but it's really important that we keep that in mind as we look at what it is that we're seeing. Now, it's especially true in business as well. We have a tendency to compare what we're doing. We see top incomers. So I work specifically with network marketers, direct sales, life coaches, real estate agents, solopreneurs, essentially. And so I experience firsthand that need to build a business, that need to generate leads, to generate prospects, to have people to share our products with, our opportunity with, to share the fact that we list homes, that we sell homes, whatever it is, that we have programs that we can take people through to coach them along the lines of whatever it is that we're looking for. So when you're tasked with being the one to build your own business, generate your own leads and all of that, it's important that we be out there. And when we're out there, especially on social media, with the way the algorithms work and all of that, we have such a tendency then to be thrown into the stew, if you will. The people that we often see most frequently are those people who share same characteristics with us. So if you're building a coaching business, if you're building a network marketing business, if you're involved with a skincare company, if you're in real estate, whatever, you've liked, friended, commented, used hashtags in some way out on social media, you have clued in the algorithms of those sites that these are areas of interest for you. And so consequently, they're going to serve back up to you like interest. They think that that's what you want to see. So that's where it becomes very easy to measure our B-roll against somebody else's A-roll and compare ourselves if we see somebody out there flashing their cars and flashing big paychecks and talking about signing clients and getting listings and multi-million-dollar producers and crossing the stage and getting big checks and all the different things. And you can essentially fill in the blank for yourself with what it is in your particular profession that you might see out there from a business perspective that creates that comparison stigma for you. So how do we go about curing that? Well, first of all, we have to acknowledge that we're doing it. That's the first thing, is to truly become aware. We live in a day and age, and maybe it was always this way. I can tell you for me, it's pretty much always been this way. And I don't know if it's my personality type or what it is, but So many of us stuff our emotions, we stuff our feelings, and we don't live in a state of awareness of our thoughts. We don't really live in a state of awareness of what's driving our thinking process and driving those feelings and emotions and driving those actions that we take on a daily basis. Now, I know that we think somewhere between 60 and 80,000 thoughts a day, and 90% of those are repetitive thoughts. So whether it's you get up in the morning, you let the dogs out, you make the coffee, you take a shower, you brush your teeth, you have some breakfast, you leave for work, you drop the kids off at daycare, you drop the kids off at school, maybe you work a home business, you go to Starbucks, whatever it is that you do, most of us are creatures of habit. And so 90% of those thoughts that we have on a daily basis are repetitive. 80% of those thoughts are negative. They're negative, and they're unconsciously negative for most of us. Most of us, I think, would consider ourselves a pretty balanced, normal, I'm using air quotes. I don't really like to use that term because what does that even mean? But, we consider ourselves among the norm, pretty standard, maybe happier than most, or slightly on the frustrated, unhappy scale right now or whatever. But most of us, I think, consider ourselves pretty middle of the road. And so we're not really aware of those negative thoughts that we're thinking on an ongoing basis, but they're there regardless. And they're triggering feelings within us that are limiting us. And most of those feelings are triggered based on something from the past. They create fears and doubt and that anxiety and that feeling of comparison, of unworthiness. It triggers those responses within us. Now, if we're not consciously thinking of that, if we're not consciously aware of it, so that we can stop, do a pattern interrupt. I know for me, for years, I've talked about, I wore one of my daughter's hair ties, like a ponytail holder. I wore it around my wrist for years to break myself. It was something I learned from Tony Robbins. He likes to clap, so he does the big clap. When you catch yourself thinking negatively, when you catch yourself and you pay attention to those thoughts that you're having, he does the whole pattern interrupt. He teaches that, and I learned that from him. Well, I don't know, for me, the clap didn't do it as well, and I certainly didn't want to do that out in public. So I started wearing just a little, it was decorative. It kind of looked like what I call a hippie bracelet. I don't mean that in a negative way at all, but just kind of like a macrame braided kind of thing with beads, and it was my daughter's, and she never wore it. So I would put that around my wrist, and when I would catch myself in negative thinking, I would snap it, and it would force me to stop, evaluate the thought, ask myself if it was serving me. In most cases, no. And then what the feeling was that came up for me, ask myself if that feeling was serving me, and then what I wanted to do to move myself out of that. That was a question I would ask myself. How do you want to move yourself beyond this feeling, this thought and this feeling and this emotion that you're having? Now, one of the biggest mistakes that I made early on is I never allowed myself to feel the feeling. And that's where I think a lot of that is my personality type. I always say, if you look behind me, there's a rug with a hole, with a hump of all the emotions and feelings and negative experiences that I've shoved under the rug behind me that I've just refused to deal with, because I see myself as a positive, happy person. And it was kind of like, nope, not going there, not going to think about that. And I didn't realize at the time what a disservice I was doing to myself by not processing that emotion. As years went on and I studied different leaders and different teachers and Eckhart Tolle and just a whole list, Joe Dispenza, a list of other people that were more from the scientific perspective of brain cognizance and all that goes on. I don't want to get super technical because I'm not a scientist and I don't know all the exact verbiage, but I've studied enough of it to understand that we do have the capacity to reprogram our brains, rewire our brains, but we have to be intentional, and that starts with that awareness for sure. So that's a big part of it is, creating that pattern interrupt and becoming aware of it. That's the first step in curing the comparison hangover. And the next thing I really want to encourage you to do is be intentional about this. If you feel like this is something that's derailing you, that limiting beliefs and all of that are holding you back from achieving the goals that you want, if you feel like you're stuck and struggling in your business, stuck and struggling in your life, stuck and struggling in a relationship, whatever it is, I want you to stop and become aware become intentional and make a commitment to live your life on a more intentional level in terms of beginning to think about, no pun intended, the thoughts that you're having, be aware of them, and write about them. Do a thought download. I've started doing it for 5 minutes every single morning. I get up and I do a thought download, and I write everything. I don't edit it. I don't think about it. I don't have judgment on it. I write whatever comes to mind. And sometimes I write it in code because I don't want somebody to find it and know that I'm even thinking that thought. And that's okay too. As long as you understand what it is, that's the most important thing. Now, there are days that I wake up and I've tossed and turned all night and I have one major thing on my brain, and I'll just do a thought download on that. And then I'll walk myself through the whole process of, where did this thought come from? What is triggering it? What's the feeling that I'm having? And is this serving me, not serving me? And processing it and kind of beginning to move forward. And it's a process, and I'm not going to get into all of that on today's call. What I really want to do is just begin to get you aware of becoming intentional with your thinking and becoming intentional with everything that you do throughout the day that leads you down that path of beginning to compare yourself to other people, whether it's social media, whether it's someone that you see at the BNI meeting, whether it's someone that you work with, maybe it's someone in your neighborhood or who runs in your social circle. Maybe it's a combination of people. It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter where you interact with them. I just am aware that social media has created more and more of that. And so, I kind of wanted to lead with that. And that's where it's easy for us to stop and reflect. When you run into somebody in your neighborhood or it's somebody who you work with or whatever, we have less of a tendency or even an ability to stop and kind of freeze frame them and evaluate what they're doing. But on social media, we can stop, we can pause, we can expand the photo, we can scan to see if they have any hairs out of place, we can scan to see if they have any blemishes on their face, is their mascara smudged, they have spinach in their teeth. I'm just kind of being funny here, but it's true. We really have the ability to open things up, have a look at them, and see how we want to proceed with our feelings around that. Am I right? Can I get a witness? Don't forget the chat box is open if you want to type something in there. That's totally awesome. And then that's where we begin to think, oh my gosh, I'm not as good as them. There's something wrong with me. How come every day their life is fantastic? They look amazing. Their nails are perfectly manicured. It starts with really, you've got to get out of your own head. In a way, you've got to get intentional in your own head more than anything, because it's a scary place in there. Your brain is like a toddler on a sugar high running around as you sit on the sidelines watching, thinking, oh my gosh, please let that toddler crash and burn soon so this can be over. So beyond that, what are some steps that you can take? Well, first of all, begin to limit your time on social media. Begin to limit your time in front of those challenges, those obstacles, those things that trigger you. Become intentional with social media. I do that a lot. I'm on social media a lot, but really and truly only about 30 minutes a day, unless I'm doing something. Today I did 2 Facebook Lives. I did some different things today. But again, that's me being very intentional out on social media. I spent very little time today, probably 7 minutes total, scrolling any news feed and looking at anything else that anybody had going on. And the biggest reason for that is because I have a to-do list today that's very long. I've set intentions for myself, for my business, for closing out this year of 2020, or look, I'm already rushing us, for closing out this year of 2019, for moving forward with my goals and planning into 2020. And I don't have time to get caught up in the drama that most often doesn't serve me and can often derail me. I don't have time to get caught up in that in terms of social media, and you don't either. So social media can be a very strong tool for building our brand, building our tribe, building our awareness. And so I'm not saying get off of social media altogether. What I am saying is lay out your framework every day of what you're going to do out on social media to move yourself forward, to move your business forward, to move all of whatever it is your goal is, to move that forward. Go do that intentionally. And if you need to stay off of social media while you're dealing with triggers, dealing with challenges, it's okay to do that. So it's like anything, be intentional with it. Be intentional with it. It's like TV. It's fine. I gave up TV back in, what year was it? It was before 9/11. It was before 2001, because I remember my husband telling me I was never going to be current with what was going on. And sure enough, man, the morning of 9/11, my phone started ringing, and I proved him wrong. I even said, see, I didn't even have to turn on the TV. My phone started ringing and everybody let me know what was going on. So it was probably back in 1997, January of 1997 is when I started doing major self-development work, really focused on that. So I'm going to guess it was sometime in 97 or 98. So it's been, 22 years. I watch TV a little bit. I watch football with my husband, both college and pro. There's not a single TV show that I watch. I don't have Netflix. I've had it before, and I have a little bit of a addictive personality with it. I had it back when you could get the CDs, and I would order like 3 at a time, whatever the most was, and I binged watch The Sopranos, Sex and the City, Big Love, 6 Feet Under, whatever all those old, I'm dating myself here, whatever all those old HBO shows were. And I've never allowed myself to get a subscription to the more current stuff because I know my personality type. I did go to the library. This was probably 2 years ago. It was a holiday weekend. My husband was flying. I went to the library and I checked out the first 2 seasons of, what's the one that took place in Albuquerque, the drug thing? I can't think of it. Anyway, you'll know what I mean. Oh, it was a big hit, and it finally ended. But it's the science teacher, and he was diagnosed with cancer, and I can't think of it right now. It's going to drive me crazy. Anyway, if anybody can think of it and type it in the chat box, please do. I checked that out, and I checked out Orange is the New Black, and I watched like 3 episodes of Orange is the New Black. I watched I watched the first and second episode of that, whatever that show is. I can't think of what it is. And I just grabbed a hold of myself and said, what are you doing? I had the whole house to myself. I had a whole list of business goals and things I wanted to do. And I was sucked in front of the TV. I packaged everything back up, got in my car, and took it to the library that day, and I took it back. And I vowed not to do that again, and I haven't. So it's the same with social media. Figure out what your tolerance level is with comparison, with things that derail you in your business. Okay, there's a great saying out there: we don't get what we want, we don't get what our goals are, we get what our habits are. We get what our habits are, and that is really true. So when you look around your world, from your physical body to your home, to your relationships, to your career and business, you are in the place that has been created by your habits, good and bad. Okay, that's not necessarily a right or wrong. Just be aware of that because it's true. And if you like what you see, keep doing more of that. If you like most of what you see, keep doing the part that you like and work on changing, choose to change that which you don't like. And if you don't like any of it, get really busy and intentional and get off of social media unless it's there to serve you and grow your business for sure. So a big part of it too is one thing that I wanted to really bring the point back around about is stories. And that kind of goes back to everybody's A role and B role and how we put our best selves out there. We make up stories around all of that. We make up stories about our own circumstances, our own past, what it means about us, how it's controlling us now, how it will control us in the future. And we make up stories about everyone else as well. And that doesn't serve anybody because you don't really know what another person is experiencing unless you're living in their shoes. You really, truly don't. I've heard an expression recently that life is 50-50, which means 50% good, 50% not so good. I'm not even going to say bad. I personally prefer more of a 60-40 blend or maybe even 70-30. And I think that happens as we evolve along the path of personal development, really doing conscious brain work and paying attention to our thoughts, choosing those thoughts and feelings that serve us better and move us forward. But the reality of it is, there are always going to be those things that come along that create challenges, create frustration, create anxiety. There's that A word again, whatever it is. That's just a normal part of life. There is sadness, there is death, there are school shootings, which are horrible. There's 9/11. There are things like that that happen. That's the reality of life. And for most of us, we're not going to feel good about that initially. We're going to feel some sadness. So happiness is not our goal. I like to use two words that I feel more are our goal, and one of them is peace and joy. We can be sad but still have joy in our lives. We can be sad but still feel peace in our lives, knowing that that's the way it goes in life, and not that something isn't awful, isn't devastating, but we know that basically we're okay, we're going to be okay. And I'm generalizing here, and I don't want to be too overly general, because I realize that there are horrible things that happen in life that we don't control, that happen to us personally, that are devastating. And I'm by no means trying to downplay that, or say that you shouldn't feel emotional, that you shouldn't feel sad, you shouldn't feel those feelings. In fact, I'm saying you should, because life is 50-50 or 60-40 or 70-30 or whatever it is for you, whatever you decide that is for you. And so it's okay to settle into those feelings, those emotions, and feel that negativity for a time. But the key to it is not to let what happened continue to be the story that you tell yourself and that you tell others, and that continues to run your life. And a lot of people get caught up in that. They definitely get caught up in that. I have been caught up in that. Not necessarily a story that was horrible, but elementary school bullying, which created feelings of unworthiness. I mean, it's kind of funny. I've gone back a number of times to try to unpack what it was that made me feel like, I'm a 3 on the Enneagram, if you follow that. And a 3 is an achiever or performer. And we feel like our value in society, our ability to be loved and be considered worthy by others, is based on our performance, based on doing, and proving ourselves that way, versus just who we are, what our personality is, and the fact that we're a pleasant person or whatever. And I totally step right into that personality type, because I'm constantly doing. I remember years ago, even my son saying to me once, and he was young, he was probably in middle school. He wasn't, a baby, but he was in middle school. And I remember him saying to me once, "Mom, like, you never sit down, like you never slow down, like you never stop." And it's kind of true. The only time I ever really stop is when I'm at the beach. And even then, after a while, I can feel my brain start to go, okay, I've had enough sun and sand. I need to be working on something, need to be working on a project. And I have finally allowed myself to be accepting, to be compassionate with myself about that characteristic, because it's played out extremely well for me in a lot of areas, but it's been very damaging for me in a lot of areas too, in my personal relationships, where that workaholic tendency, has created some unrest and some unhappiness with my family members and good friends and stuff like that. And I get it. And as I've evolved and become more aware of that, I'm able to very intentionally now, and I do very intentionally, schedule my calendar. And I work like crazy during that time, and I try not to let anything impede that time when I have it blocked for business stuff. And then that time that's playtime, and my husband's home or family members are home, I have to put aside that part of my brain that wants to stay engaged and wants to work. And I would love to tell you that those thoughts don't come up, that I don't feel little resentment sometimes when we're sitting around and somebody wants to watch a movie on Netflix. My husband has Netflix. I don't. Or no, he doesn't have Netflix. Sorry, he has Amazon. But my kids have Netflix. So when they come, like, they plug it in. Oh, let's watch this movie. And there's that little part of me that's the last thing I want to do. It's like, that's great. Let's turn it on. Can I get my laptop? Is it cool with everybody if I get my laptop and just do some little things while we're sitting here killing our brain cells watching a movie? I'm kidding. That sounds like I'm being judgmental. I'm not. I'm just judging for me. That's my personality type. I would much rather be developing something in my business, putting something out there, than wasting 2 hours, which is typically what I feel like it is when I dial into a movie. Not always by any means. In fact, there's a ton of great movies coming out. My husband and I have already blocked out ones we're going to, but that's different too. That's relationship building. That's our date night. That's a lot of different things like that. So all of that's important. So I kind of got off on a tangent there. The biggest thing, as you begin to do that thought download, I mentioned I do that. I set a timer for 5 minutes. I'm evolved enough now that I don't even have to set a timer. I just am meticulous about doing it, and I free flow and write. But things you want to think about, once you've done that, you've written all your thoughts down, then every day, if there's more than one thought, I go through and I categorize the top 5. What are the top 5 that are bugging me? And then I pick out the number 1 thought, trigger, whatever, and then I do some further journaling on it. What is the feeling that comes up? And what is that based around? Is it a person that's triggering that thought? Is it a group of people? Is it a thing? Is it an event? Is it an event that's in the future? Is it an event that's in the past? What is it that's triggering that for me? And then a question that can be beneficial is why? Because when you ask yourself that question, when you ask yourself that question about something you're experiencing, your brain wants to go to work and tell you why. And the key for you is to calm your mind and listen, engage in intuitive listening and figure out what it is that you are telling you, because you know you have the answers inside you. Sometimes it takes a little while to draw those out, but you definitely do. And then, with the emotion things, I mentioned the term anxious. That's just maybe it's just me. I would love to hear from others if that's something that you have been familiar with in the past. But, are you annoyed? Are you anxious? Are you frustrated? Are you doubtful? Are you jealous? Do you have envy? Are you confused? Are you defensive? Are you desperate? Are you hopeful? Are you scared? Are you conflicted? Are you committed? Are you encouraged? Are you driven? Are you ambitious? Like, what are the feelings that you're feeling? And sometimes we can take that thought and twist it around without even getting into the negative emotion. Sometimes when we get that written down on our thought download, our logical mind can kick in right away and say, oh my gosh, that is crazy. And I know it's crazy brain for thinking that. Stop it. We're not going there. This is the thought that I'm going to choose to have around that. So an example of that is, let's say you find out that somebody said something negative about you, and maybe it's business related. Maybe it's somebody on the job or whatever. Here's the thing. We have a tendency to want to take that personally and want to look at ourselves and think, oh my gosh, is it true? And that's a great question to ask yourself. Is it true? Is what they said, that negative thing that they said, is it really true? And how do you know it's true? And what does it mean about you? And if you can easily say no, or even if you don't easily say it, but if you can go through and say, no, that's not true about me, that is another person's opinion, and it has much more to do with them and something that's going on within them that's triggering them that they're not taking personal responsibility for. And I'm just going to choose to let that go. Just going to choose to let that go. So that's where you can shift a thought that you may be having where you say, no, stop. Really, that has nothing to do with me. That has nothing to do with me, and I'm going to choose just to move on from that. Okay? I'm dealing with a situation like that with my mom right now. I won't get into the details of it, but she's making a decision to do something that I don't want her to do. And quite frankly, I've asked her not to do it, but she's going to do it anyway. And the reality of it is, she has every right to do it. It's annoying me because I don't want her to. But that's my problem. It's not hers. So I can choose to either be mad and frustrated with her, okay? I can choose to have the thought that she's wrong, and then I can choose to have the feeling of anger and frustration and annoyance and whatever at it, which will I will then choose to take the action of being snippy with her, being short with her, ignoring her, not seeing her for a time, shunning her in some way. And at the end of it, the result is, my mom is 80. How old is she right now? My mom just turned 83, and she's not going to be around all that much longer. Do I want to look back later and at something that really and truly at the end of the day is petty? It's about my ego more than anything. Do I want to look back and say, wow, that was pretty lame? Or do I want to be a grown up and let my logical brain say to me, stop it. It's not about you. Get your ego out of the way. And so that's a case where, yeah, I could stop and settle into the feeling of like why I feel like she shouldn't be doing it because I don't want her to. But again, the reality of that is that's just crazy. That's me trying to control her. That's me wanting to run her through my playbook that I have for her and my playbook that I have for every single person in my life, including myself, of how I feel like they should be acting, my expectations for them in relating with me. And when they don't follow the playbook, it's kind of like your script, if you're in acting or theater, if they deviate from the lines, then we get upset. That's a whole nother call that's coming in January or February. I already have it lined out, but we have to be really careful of that. So that's a case where I can look at the circumstance. I can look at the thought that I'm having. I can not even choose to go into that feeling because I know when I use my grown-up brain, when I manage my mind, that I'm being illogical, I'm being irrational, and I'm being a baby, quite frankly. And so I can choose to have a feeling that is acceptance. Even if I don't like it, I can accept it. She has the right to do what she wants to do with regard to another relationship in our family that does involve me, but it's not my place to try to get in the middle of that. So that's just an example. So, that's a big part of it, is really becoming aware regularly of your thoughts. And I promise you, as you'll begin to do these different things, when you'll begin to do a thought download, when you're out on social media and some form of comparison, comparanoia, or tendency to measure yourself up against somebody else, when you start having that tendency and you do that pattern interrupt, you snap that rubber band, you do the thought download, you journal about it, you write about why. Why did this person trigger me? Why did this photo that I saw on social media trigger me? And what am I going to choose to do about it? And is this really true? Am I being fair? Am I being controlling? Am I really being kind and compassionate to myself by letting this annoy me? So that's a big step for it that you can do. I was going to look in here. Oh, and the other important thing is, again, it's apples and oranges. We make up, there's three sides to every story. I know you've heard that before, but there's one person's side, the other person's side, and then somewhere in the middle is what the truth is. And it's the same on social media. Oftentimes we're comparing apples to oranges when we compare our life situation to someone else's. I know for me in network marketing for years, I used to compare myself to other top income earners. And a lot of them in my early days, they were successful women who were a good bit older than me, anywhere from probably 15 to 25 years older than me. All of them, most of them, almost all of them, probably 80% of them were empty nesters. They had raised their children, they had gone through all of that, and now they had all of this time available to build the business. Well, not me. I mean, I was married to an airline pilot. He was gone 4 days a week. I had little children. I had such a limited amount of time, and I chose to live within that story for a long time, to compare myself to them, to, harsh on myself, should on myself, do all these different things that did not serve me because I was comparing apples to oranges. There's no way that I could compare what they were accomplishing to what I was able to accomplish at that time. So it's important to really do that thought download and use your rational thinking mind, not your lizard brain, not your limiting beliefs, not the story that you've made up from that lizard or monkey or whatever that sits on your shoulder and whispers in your ear and tells you all that type stuff, okay? Those are the ways that you're going to cure the comparison hangover. You're going to cure the comparison hangover when you realize that the life that you're living, the story that you're telling yourself, the actions that you're taking, the results that you're experiencing are yours and yours alone. And somebody else's success or perceived success has nothing to do with your ability to have the same thing. It's just that you've got to manage your mind, okay, manage your thoughts, manage your feelings, and then manage your actions so that you are taking the actions that move you in the direction that you want to go. And when you do those kind of things, that's what's going to move you past the comparison hangover. So that's what I had for you today. I would love to open it up for any questions if anybody has any. Next week, we're going to talk about the characteristics of a 7-figure earner. Who do we have to become in order to have the qualities to attract that into our lives? But if you have any questions, you can type them in the chat box, or you can unmute yourself, and I would love to answer any questions. I'll give it just a minute or so. Breaking Bad, that was it. Thank you, Lisa. Breaking Bad was that darn series that I couldn't think of. Yes, I just now saw it. It probably popped up a little while ago. Sometimes the message are slightly delayed, but yes, Breaking Bad. I could see the 2 words. I mean, I could see that it was 2 words, but I could not come up with that. So anyway, so I will end this at this point then, and I will look forward to seeing you back next week when we talk about the characteristics of the 7-figure earner. Thanks so much for being on, and I will see you next week. Have a great day.